welcome back to the podcast. My name is Tammy. I'm your host, and welcome to the Full Weight of Joy. This is the podcast for women who are done stressing about the weight of the world and really want to step into who God called them to be. And we do this by understanding ourselves, by understanding who God created us to be and what on earth are we supposed to do. Like God says that He's created us like a good plan before we were even born. And I know I spent most of my life really searching for what is my purpose, what is my calling. And let's face it, we also ask ourselves in multiple seasons of life, who am I now? And so today, I thought it'd be fun. I just finished recording an episode about imposter syndrome and how it's not a bad thing. How when you believe you have imposter syndrome, it's because you're freaking awesome. All right. It's because you are about to experience something that you've never experienced before. It's because you are worthy and capable of what God's called you to do, and not necessarily in your own strength, but His strengths. And it's because He's uniquely gifted you for what you're about to do. You may not just have all the answers. So today, I thought it would be fun to talk about another aspect that has helped me, has helped my clients, and helps my friends as well. Because we all talk about goals. We all talk about measuring success. We talk about measuring growth. And a lot of times, growth doesn't look the same for everyone. And so even as working with clients, I had this discovery call with someone, and she's like, Tammy, like, what I want is self-awareness. What I want is to overcome imposter syndrome. How do I measure that? How do I, what goals do I create? Because it's just a feeling. And I was like, this would be great to talk about, because there are tangible things that we can measure. These tangible, and especially, and I'm going to talk into the, what we can measure for ourselves, also things that work in coaching and different things. But I want you to think about it, for your life coming up, from now, what do you want out of life? What you focus on grows. What you measure, you can excel in, you can grow in. And if we don't look at what we want, then how do we know it's working? No matter what we're doing, we know that if we don't measure, even let's take weight loss. I just recorded a podcast that's going to play probably in December with a friend of mine who's a health coach. And her thing is the non-diet is looking at healthy habits and healthy lifestyle versus the weight on a scale, looking at fat loss goals versus weight loss goals. And some of the things she said is that you can't measure the difference, but you feel the difference. The weight may not change or shift on the scale, but your clothes fit different. So there are changes. And so I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to expand that a little bit. And what are some things that we can measure that we necessarily can't see? And so first, let's talk about things that we can see, tangible things that we can touch, feel, and measure, with our eyes or with numbers. And some of those are how many clients you have. You can measure that. Clear identification of strengths. You can measure whether you know your strengths or not. But to measure if you're getting stronger in those areas, that's more of a feeling and a more intangible thing. And so another one is your increased business or your side hustle. You went from not having a book to writing a book. You went from not having a book club to having a book club. You went from not having a side gig to having a side gig. You went from not serving to serving. You can measure that it went from 0 to 100. We can measure that because you see the change. Other things, just your work-life integration. You can see that by looking at your calendar, you see you're spending more time with things that matter to you. That is a visible indication that you're growing. But what can we measure? What should we be measuring that may not be visible to the naked eye? We can't tangibly hold the evidence in our hands, but we know that it's in our hearts. And so I want to talk about this because as you are growing, as you are looking to expand and you are stepping into who God's called you to be, these aspects are just as important as the numbers. These aspects, I truly believe, and this is one of the areas that is kind of difficult to talk about, like how I coach, because we work on a lot of these intangible goals. We look at a lot of these things and like how we feel, our and it's so crazy because we use like how we feel. It could be an emotion. It could be it's hard to nail down. It's like, well, one day I feel confident, one day I don't. And so we make the intangible, we kind of work to make those tangible. And they do shift with our season, they shift with our mood. But overall, we can tell there's evidence in our life that we're growing. And so I just want to talk about some of these things because and write them down and ask yourself, like, are you growing in these areas? Because this is the deep work. This is are you becoming who God's called you to be work that we all need to do, whether you're working with a coach or not. So even if you're on your own, these are things that you can coach yourself through, that you can kind of start to measure. And it starts with getting a baseline. But like some of these things will increase self-confidence. I know when I actively take different steps, I can increase my confidence. Every year, like I look at my podcast from it's almost been 4 years that I've been doing my podcast. And I look at the confidence I had when I first started and how I would write out detailed information. I would write out almost not word for word. I learned early on that was not the right way to do it for me. Not like a teleprompter kind of style. But now if you look at my notes, I have a couple of concepts, I have a couple of words, and I have some things to jog my memory if I want to tell a story or something. But overall, it takes a lot. It's a lot less preparation on paper. I still do the preparation, but it looks different. And so that self-confidence and it shows. You look at, even I didn't record the videos for a very long time. I don't remember the date that I actually started, but I know it's been over I think the last 2 years, I think I've been recording the videos. And as I'm starting to put those onto YouTube and I look to see even the way I carried myself. And so that is an increased self-confidence. And that's in what area of life do you want that self-confidence? The way you talk to people who are strangers, the way you walk into a room, just confident in your skills. Well, let me, a hint, the more you understand how you're wired, the more you're confident in this is how God wired this. He made me this way for a reason. And you can feel more confident about it because it's not oh, I hope that I will always remember this or will I forget? No, it's part of who you are. It's how God wired you. So this is just you. And so you get to step into that. Another thing is this overcoming limiting beliefs. These beliefs, the more we start to uncover these beliefs that are holding you back. Remember I talked about how these beliefs don't actually necessarily, nothing says that they're true. That a belief scientifically is a thought paired with an emotion, thought over time. It happens over and over where your brain is oh, I got it. When we walk into a room of people we don't know, we feel nervous. Got it. Our belief is we don't like to go into that room, or we don't feel confident in that room, or we don't belong in that room. So those are the beliefs that come from just that thought. Do you belong in the room? Heck yes. Are you capable of, let's look at the truth, and then we can start to overcome those limiting beliefs. But that's one area that's intangible because it's a belief. It's not really something we can write it out. But it's not a number we can see the scale go down or the muscle go up, or the number of reps go up. But we can start to see I used to believe that I was not a people person, or that I was too shy to talk to new people, and now I can hold conversations with strangers. That is a belief that was overcome. And so we can see, and which also leads to confidence. I think everything that's where we measure it, is what level of confidence do you have in this. But anyway, so these overcoming limiting beliefs are intangible. However, they are life changing. when you get over your money beliefs, when you get over your beliefs that you're not worthy of the calling God's put on your heart, isn't that even crazy? Like if your friend said, oh, like I know God called me to this, but I don't feel worthy to it. What would you tell her? You would tell her that if God's called you to it, you best do it. If God called you to it, he is equipping you. And he doesn't like, he equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped. Okay. So that's why, like when we look at these and this overcoming limiting beliefs it is something we can measure, but it's just intangible that we have to get serious and clear, and we have to get deep with ourselves to see that. We have to be willing to address our limiting beliefs. I had a client who, no matter what, she didn't want to look at the beliefs she held. She just wanted to overcome them. And I'm like, well, if we don't know what they are, how are we going to overcome them? And she fought the same issues. And now we're getting to the point where she's like, oh, I don't have to believe these anymore. I can be free of them. And it's like, yes. So we went through a process, and it just took a little longer than some, but hey, she's also had them since she was little. So a greater self-awareness. Now, an enhanced understanding of our self-awareness, it's so crazy because I was reading a study that says 90% of the people believe that they're self-aware. But when you start asking them questions, only about 10 to 15% on average would qualify as self-aware with their indicators. And so what does self-aware mean? It means you know your core values, you know your priorities, you know your strengths, your weaknesses, you know your gifts, your talents, you know your tendencies, you know your blind spots, and you know how God wired you. You know why you do what you do, and then you're able to make a decision beyond that. Like you don't have to react, you get to respond. That you understand what happens when you go into stress and you identify it. Like that's true self-awareness. And so we can understand, okay, like we can have a checklist really of how self-aware are you? And we can go down the list to see these are things we get to uncover. And so again, it's intangible because it's within, but the more we know it, the more it helps some of the tangible results that we want. If we have self-awareness, we can do what God's called us to do. And so another one is emotional fulfillment. It's so hard because I was like, well, what is fulfillment? Well, it depends. You get to define these for yourself. So we can't just write it on a scale of 1 to 10 and say, how fulfilled are you? Because you get to describe what the scale looks like, how it's defined. And so that's why it's a more of an intangible metric. And because the fulfillment, it's so important. And we know when we're getting it and we know when we don't have it. But a lot of times we don't quite know how to go from 0 to 10. But when we're working intentionally and when we define what fulfillment is, then all of a sudden we can start to take action to get it, to lean more into it. And the same with stronger boundaries. So yes, like we can physically write a boundary down and then we can measure it. But if we don't actually sit and do the deep work to figure out what boundaries we need, if someone else's boundary may sound good, but it actually may hinder you from getting what you want because it's too stringent or too focused on something that you're like, well, like it's easy for me to say no to people that I don't know. I'm not a people pleaser. So someone who may have created a boundary based on they need to say no or say, I need to think about it. Well, you may know this response quicker. So you may not need that boundary. So having stronger boundaries and, setting and maintaining them, a lot of times it's not really tangible, but in your heart when you're living in the boundaries, and you can tell by your energy level, right? So that intangible thing can start to become tangible when you define it and you start putting parameters around it. So that's one thing that we can intentionally measure, but we don't think to measure, that it's not something we can visibly see. Reduction of overwhelm, feeling less overwhelmed and more in control of your life with a clearer sense of direction and priorities. So I just talked to the last podcast, we talked about overwhelm and how it's an indication that it's a gift because it's a sign that you need clarity. It's a call to clarity, I think is what I called it. And so we get that, and that we can feel like less overwhelmed. So you can say, okay, no, I was at an overwhelm level 10, and now I'm at a 7.5. Like you can, and why is that? And we can talk about the changes that were made. But if you don't know to measure that, then and the fact that you can actually grow in that or grow less of that, you can do that intentionally. Others will improve decision making. This is again going along with boundaries. And when you know yourself and you know like what decisions do you want to make more decisively, like when we start to define this intangible like idea of decision making, when we create a framework that works for you, we create a yes no matrix or a tree, or we put in your values, your self-awareness that we've already started to measure, then all of a sudden we can say, wow, I am making decisions a lot more confidently, a lot more certainly, and I can trust the decisions that I make. Do we all make right decisions all the time? No. However, if you have that greater decision making framework, you're more likely to make decisions aligned with you and not have to backtrack later. So it does help. And then also just the peace of mind. We can measure that, but it's more of an experience. And if we don't describe it, we don't define it, we don't say, okay, this is where I am and this is what I want to get to. And of course, as we go, it will shift and change, because as we get more information, as we lean into our strengths, we see that for me, peace of mind doesn't mean that everything's all calm. Like I like activity. And so peace of mind and presence of mind, it really means being right in the moment of where I am. So if I'm making dinner, I'm focused on making dinner, and yeah, I can dream and I can cut up with the kids. But it doesn't mean that I'm thinking about work when I don't want to be. If I want to sit and think about work, sure. But really it's like I can be in the moment when I'm in a better description here is like when I'm with my kids, I can be fully with my kids and I don't have to worry about work, because I have that peace of mind that I've done what I need to do. I've worked towards creating a work-life balance. I've worked towards the life that I want. And when I'm with them, I get to be with them. Like I'm excited because one of the things that I'm doing next year is for my son's, like the homeschool co-op, is there's a tutor who kind of leads it on Tuesdays. And I'm going to step up into doing that, which means that I'm losing every Tuesday, but I'm gaining extra time with my son, like as he's a senior. And the power of prayer, because even 6 months ago, he was so adamant against me doing this. He didn't want me all up in his business. And when I asked him, I was like, it's time for me to apply. It's time for me to make the steps. If you don't want me to, I will not. And know that multiple people have asked me to do this, and I want to do this. But if you don't want me to do it, I'm out and I won't bring it up again. And he went from being very adamantly like, no, I don't want you. No, that would be terrible. I don't want you. I have you all day at home. And then I have to have you when my one day I get to go to class and I get to be with my friends. And I was like, okay, like we'll just pray about it. And when I brought it up to him earlier this week, he's like, no, I think that's a good idea. I'm okay. No, I'm okay with it, Mom. You can do it. No, I think you should do it. And to see that like God changed that has been really cool. So sorry, I'm just, we're supposed to talk about the things that God does. And that's one area, because if you have talked to me at all, we've been struggling a lot this year. Like I'm a very motivated, outgoing, and I push. If I want something, I go for it. Whereas he's been numbing out. And instead of looking at the responsibility ahead, he has been pushing away and like the options that you need to make. Like, let's talk about college. Let's talk about like graduation and all of this. And he's just been pulling back. And so we've been kind of butting heads. And it's one of the prayers that I've had is like, okay, God, like show me how to relate to him. Show me how to be the mom that he needs. Cause I know he doesn't need me telling him what to do. So help me muzzle my mouth, because being Enneagram 1, I know what to do. And I also see his capabilities. And so then but anyway, I could go on about that, but really I'm just so like that peace of mind. I can see how that's shifted. I can see how God's changed that. And if I didn't define, for me, it's not a yoga retreat where I'm like sitting in silence and just meditating. Like that's sure it's peaceful, but that's not what I would describe my peaceful life as. And the other is just a sense of legacy and impact. We don't know we don't know the ripple effects of what we do. It's really hard because we can say something, and I have teachers and I have mentors in my life or people who come in like I don't even know who they are, and they've said something that like gripped my heart, and they made an impact, and it's shifted like the way I think about things or the research that I've done, or they will never know the impact they made on my life. And the impact, and then the impact that I make on my kids and on my family. And hopefully for those of you on a podcast, like I've said something in these like almost 4 years of doing this that has made an impact on you. But it's not a tangible thing that we can measure. I can't measure like, okay, everyone, I have 100 downloads. I impacted 100 people. No, because not every podcast lands with every person. And not everything I say is for everyone. But we can measure our impact based on the closeness we are to God and how He has put it on our heart what to do. It's the actions we take towards impact. And because His role is the result, His role is the outcome. And so that's intangible idea of an increased or a sense of impact comes from knowing that I'm doing what God's called me to do, that I'm getting out of my comfort zone, that I'm pushing my limits, that I am looking at my limiting beliefs and I'm rewiring them. And sometimes it takes me going to one of my girlfriends and asking like, this is the thought that comes to my mind. And they're like, Tammy, there is 100% untruth there. This is how I see you. This is how God, this is the gift that you have. And so sometimes it takes getting out of our own way to see these intangible growth. And why is it important? Why am I talking about it? Because I know that we want to grow. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you were just like, no, I'm good where I am. If you didn't have that need to create an impact, to serve, if God hasn't called you to more, I don't think that I do a good enough job telling stories and like jokes to keep you entertained on this podcast. I'm not really about the entertainment. I'm more of the like get down to business kind of person. And when I realized that, like, again, when I understanding me, and that's more of my style. And then I look at what other coaches are doing and I tried for a while to emulate like, oh, I need to do more of this. And it's like, but that's not me. Like people need, God has me a certain way. He has you a certain way. And so when we step into and we start to look at ourselves, we start to look at how God wired us, then there's that confidence that comes because He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't make errors. We may feel unequipped, but if we're called, He will work to equip us. And sometimes it is understanding our boundaries. It is understanding the impact that we make. It is understanding the limiting beliefs that we have that He never intended for us to believe. It is the reconnection with our purpose. I didn't even talk about this. It's like every time you feel overwhelmed. Then when you like, okay, well, this is how God wired me. This is the purpose I hold that He's called me to. When we reconnect to that, that's also growth because we get astray. There's times that I've tried different things that have fallen flat and then I get clear. I'm like, God, why? And He's like, because I didn't tell you to do that. I didn't ask you to go do that. That's what Susie is doing down the street. Like, that's not for you. And so by reconnecting with your purpose, by realigning with how God's created you, we can measure that growth. We can see evidence. We just have to look harder for it because it's not as visible as, a scale moving. It's not as visible as dollars in the bank. It's not as visible as, whatever visible, whatever lane you're in. People who show up to hear you talk, or soaps that you're making, it's not as visible as, well, I was selling 100 and now I'm selling 3,000. Like, that's a visible, tangible result. But in that process, who are you becoming? Because I guarantee there's so much more gold in there than just the numbers you see. And so as you start to look at who you're becoming, and as you start to decide, like, who am I? Think about some of these things that I've talked about, the intangible things to grow. And what do you want to start to measure? What do you want to start to journal about and write down? And where do you want to see God pour into? Because I guarantee if you say, okay, God, I'm looking for more confidence in this area, He will, you got to be careful, because He will give you trials for you to earn the confidence, but He will also show how He's already created you to be confident in this area, how He's already called you and He's done the work to equip you. You just get to step into it. And so I hope this podcast was helpful for you. And I know that God has so much for you. And when we get out of our own way, when we start to see evidence of our growth, that confidence comes naturally, that excitement comes naturally, and we want more of it, because action begets action, motivation begets motivation, momentum begets momentum. We've got to step out. We got to do the things first, and then we start to see the growth. You can't overcome your limiting beliefs without actually understanding what your limiting beliefs are. So we can't create a stronger boundary without understanding where in our lives we need boundaries. So we do need to do that deep work. And so I have a special offer for you. If this is something that you're like, okay, I want to measure some of these things, I want to see how for me this would work, I have a special I have 3 spots, and only 3 spots open for one-on-one coaching. And what we'll do is for 3 months, we'll work together, and these intangible measurements, and really we're going to focus on dismantling imposter syndrome, over like the overwhelm that you're experiencing and this being stuck. I'm going to help you create a decision-making framework. We're going to talk about your gifts, your talents, your strengths, like the self-awareness, all those things that I mentioned. We're going to start working towards those. So that way you'll see how God wired you. You see how amazing God made you, and you'll be able to, though you won't be able to know exactly what's coming, none of us know exactly what's coming, you'll be confident in knowing that 1, God's got you, and 2, that He's equipped you for this moment. It may look a little different. We may have to get scrappy, but you have the ability, you have the capability, you're worthy of this results, and you'll figure it out. You'll have the confidence to know you figured it out. You can figure it out. So if this is interesting to you, if this, like, the way to get one of these spots is get on my calendar. Let's talk. Getting on my calendar is not a commitment. So don't worry about that. Like, if you have to sign up, this is a conversation. This is what's possible for you. And that's all it's what I want to do. My gift to you is to see what's possible. What has God put on your heart? A lot of times we haven't even acknowledged it. And the power of saying it out loud to somebody else, to say it out loud and hear it for yourself, is pretty freaking magnificent. Like, it is. When I started saying my dreams that I was terrified of, and it did take a couple of years to actually start, for me to start seeing how all the pieces were working together. But I believe it started with me admitting to one of my friends, one of my mentors, and one of my mentors and my best friends, and who I don't just see very often. But when I told her and we prayed about it, I could feel my life shift. I could feel the motion switch. And that I can feel that change. And it happened gradually. It wasn't all at once. But I was able to step, fall, step, fall, step. Like, it happens. But I wouldn't be here today if I didn't say that out loud and admit it to myself and to my friend then. If I didn't say, God, I hear you. And so get on the call. Let's talk about what's possible, what more looks like for you. And when God is, and this question of who am I that we tend to ask as we go into different phases of our life, like, let's get that answered. Who did God create you to be? And so that's this one-on-one, you and I focus on your God dream, your God gifts, your God talents. like what God has been whispering to you, just you and I together, just one-on-one. And so, like I said, I have 3 spots open. We'll meet 3 months. Like, can you imagine 3 months from now, if you are able to say that you have more self-confidence, that you're able to say you know how God wired you, and you know what your purpose is and the vision and your goals. Like, what is possible when you can say that? And that's what I want for you. So get on my calendar. The link's in the show notes. Again, it's a free call. And we'll just talk. And if it's not right, or if it's not right yet, then that's okay too. Say yes to yourself. If God's prompting you to say, I should get on a call, it doesn't even matter if you don't know what we're going to talk about. I'll ask the questions. I'll lead it. Don't you worry. We'll get there. I have never got on a call with someone who we're like, well, this was pointless. They get something out of it every time. All right. With that, friend, get on my calendar. Let's chat. Let's see what's possible for you. And let's see what we can do to make 2025 and our future, step into who God called us to be. Because when you shine your light, it also gives other people that evidence, and that gives them the courage to shine their light as well. It's this ripple effects. You don't even know how you are impacting others when you step into who God's called you to be. But I guarantee that you are. And so with that, choose joy until joy chooses you, and I will see you really soon. All right, bye.